Hello folks, welcome back to Reality Check with Arvind Swaminathan. You know me by now? Now this is a continuation, and this one is going to be in two almost separate parts but the same video. First let's finish up with what was happening last time. This BBC documentary and the Hindenburg report with the third prong of that attack, Victoria Nuland in Delhi. Now look at the timing. All three within about a week or 10 days of each other. And Victoria Nuland was in Delhi at the time. That's what makes it really suspicious. That it's not just national or local people, but international. Now whereas the BBC may have been funded by Huawei, the Chinese government, the Hindenburg report seems to suggest Congress complicity in it. Why? Why are they making such a big thing about it? Because they see not just an opportunity to bring Modi down, but they're trying to make a lot of money in the process. How? Let's see. Adani took over a news channel, NDTV. And actually some of the staff were relieved of duties. One of them was a Mr. Ravish Kumar, a rabidly anti-Modi and anti-BJP critic, who, the moment he's laid off, ends up in New York. And he's seen coming in and out of the Hindenburg premises at least 6 or 7 times. Now what does that suggest? Delhi, NDTV, or via Mumbai, New York, Hindenburg. Plus, see the pressure put on the Adani group and therefore the BJP government. Credit Suisse in Switzerland stops accepting Adani bonds as collateral. Followed almost immediately by, yes, you knew that, Citigroup. Again, Rothschild. Wherever you look, you find the ghost of the Rothschilds pulling the strings here and there, from behind the scenes. It's rare that you see the name Rothschild anywhere, but they're there. Those two. And now, even more pressure, a Norwegian fund investment concern over the last 2 months has sold off something like $200 million worth in their stake in Adani groups. Now see the pressure there to crack up Adani. Fortunately, he's still standing firm. But with all this hoo-ha going on, what does the Congress-ruled state go in for? They start raiding all of Adani's warehouses and companies. They're hoping to get a lot of money from him to shut them up, to stop it. I hope he doesn't pay up. Because as far as I can see, he's cleaner than most of any of the Congress people concerned. He can always get back at them. Now you understand the makeup of all this. Now it's worth thinking about. BBC report, Hindenburg group, Ravish Kumar, Victoria Nuland. What was she doing in Delhi? If there had been riots, perfect scenario for her to get the CIA's act together. But when they didn't happen, she's going to treat this, as will the CIA and all other agencies in the US, as a dry run. Exactly what they did before 9/11. If you remember in 1993, there was an explosion in the in the car park of those trade tower buildings. 5 or 6 people died. And you realize what were the comments made by the neoconservatives in the US at the time. They said a lot more people are going to have to die before some action is taken. You had 9/11. You begin to understand what I mean by a dress rehearsal or a dry run? Now we have to be careful in this country. The Americans keep screaming about China or Russia messing about in their elections. What do? They've been doing this for decades. The first one we know of, which they finally admitted, was 1953. Mossadegh in Iran. The next one was Patrice Lumumba, the elected, was it Prime Minister or President of the Congo, which had just become independent. They had him assassinated and replaced by their asset. Then Colonel Mobutu, later who promoted himself to, I think, General or Field Marshal Mobutu, who let the Americans plunder the Congo Republic for about 20 odd years afterwards. Then the South Vietnamese president, who suddenly decided he wanted to do things for Vietnam, not for the Americans. He was assassinated. Salvatore Allende of Chile. He was not a military man, and he wanted something good for Chile, his country. He was assassinated, replaced by General Pinochet. And what was the biggest gain from that? The Chilean copper mines. Who's responsible, or who owns that mining company? The Anaconda Mining Company? Rothschilds. Now, you begin to understand how the Americans have been interfering in the affairs of so many different countries. Of late, of course, it was Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. But they don't like anybody interfering in their country. No. You see what I mean? The colonial attitude? We can do anything, but you mustn't touch us. We're above the law. Now you see what you're trying to put into the Congress people here. They believe they're above the law. And you like that attitude because now they can keep everybody here down. What they're trying to do is remove Modi and put a very pliable, ignorant person like Rahul Gandhi on the throne. They can get whatever they want out of him. With Modi around, no thorium in Tamil Nadu. With Rahul Gandhi, you pay him a little bit, you get your way. Because that entire family is ruled by how much money can they get. Now, as a result of all this, states where Congress is in power, the Congress party, I mean, they're raiding all of Adani's warehouses, companies, this, that, and the other. Why? Because they believe you mess about with him often enough, he will pay you to keep quiet. And he probably was having to pay them until 2014 because they've been in business since 1985 under Congress auspices. And we know that without payment, Congress never allowed you to do anything. The worst part is, as long as Congress governments were in power, there was a clamp down on everything. Nobody could go beyond a certain amount. They made sure of that with license Raj. With Modi, he said, produce as much as you want. They're using proper business habits or business techniques. You cannot grow by simply raising prices, which is what the Congress did for almost 7 decades. So to show that you're a growing concern, you just keep raising prices and say, look, it was only 200 million last year, it's now 300 million. All you've done is increase prices. That is not the way to grow. The way to grow is, if you're producing 1,000 pieces this year, 15,000 next year, 30,000 the year after that. That will increase your turnover and taxation will also increase. Not by raising prices, which is inflation, but by increasing production, which is what the Modi pattern is, which Congress doesn't seem to want or like. Congress never had the brains to implement that. Now you understand the game fully. Trying both internal people and external people, the corrupt people want to remove Modi. The honest and decent people want him to stay. Which is preferable? As far as the Americans are concerned, the corrupt people are what they want. Because they believe everybody has a price. And they can be bought. Which the Congress people can be. We know that. Because wherever you have had Congress governments in power, it's been scam after scam after scam. Because the UPA government between 2004 and 2014, they took donations from different ministries from part of their budgetary income for projects. They also took or got Manmohan Singh, the Prime Minister, to transfer money from the Prime Minister's Relief Fund into the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, which is literally a sort of personal fief of the Gandhi family. Now you understand why no outside government wants Modi in power. Because they are not for sale. You get the message? So if you want an honest India and an India that wants to go forward, stick with Modi. Now friends, we get to the second half. It's more like a history lesson. But don't get me wrong, it is important. Why? There is a saying, if you ignore the lessons to be learned from history, you're condemned to repeat it. And that is what is happening here. Now the reason I said it's the Rothschilds in the background, Citigroup. Now if Citigroup is involved, they must have pulled the strings with Credit Suisse and possibly the Norwegian company as well. Because they too do not want a strong man like Modi at the center. Now, when I say history, what has happened with this Hindenburg thing, report? It's happened before. In my memory, wait a minute, don't get me wrong. I'm not that old. I'm old, yes, but not prehistoric. The first time it comes up was 1815, the Battle of Waterloo. Nathan Rothschild, the first of the London firm of Rothschild and Co., increased his wealth 20 times in one day. How? His observer was watching the Battle of Waterloo. And when it was decided, this messenger went straight back to London and informed Nathan Rothschild 24 hours before Wellington's courier got to London. So what did he do? He went to the stock exchange, stood in his place, and got his agents to sell all the British war bonds he had, called consols. Now, knowing his agents, everybody thought, hey, heavens, maybe Napoleon has won. And if Napoleon had won, those consols are worthless. So they started selling. And the price crashed. About 1:30 in the afternoon, he got all his messengers to start buying back those consols. And he bought them back for pennies. What were worth pounds, he was getting back for pennies, which is short selling, if you like. You see, it's not new. It's something that started there. It's the first, shall we say, recorded or known version of this. And the Rothschilds seem to have instigated the first time. The next time, there was a run on the bank of one of his competitors. Whose competitor? The competitor of a man called J.P. Morgan. He let round, a rumor got out that this bank was going under. So everybody went in there, took his deposits out. It's called a run on the bank. Yes, that bank went bankrupt. But J.P. Morgan, he was laughing. It is said later that he started that rumor. And the next one, of course, was the Great Depression, 1929. It's only recently it was admitted it was the bankers who caused it. How? From about 1918 onwards, money supply was pretty free. There were dollars everywhere because they were printing that money. I mean the Federal Reserve. Let me explain that Federal Reserve Bank is not owned by the US government. It is owned by a group of private bankers. And the Rothschilds have the controlling interest in that particular establishment. Now, around 1928, early 29, they got this particular idea. They suddenly reduced money supply by about 30-35%. Currency notes were in very short supply, and that's when the banks called in all their loans. Now, the law as it was then, if the bank called in a loan, you had to settle it within 24 hours. You can understand the free-for-all that occurred. Now, anybody who had prior knowledge made millions because he sold his shares for dollars and bought the same thing back at pennies. It is said Joe Kennedy made about 200 million. I hope it is true. Or if it's not true, well, you've got to call it a rumor. But it is said he did. And of course, making it illegal for Americans to hold gold, which had to be handed in at $20 an ounce, which after Bretton Woods they sold for $35 an ounce. Anyway, the net result was, as you know, the Great Depression, the Wall Street crash of 1929. It happened again, 2008, 2009, in the US. Again, this was the Lehman Brothers who went under. And that created a problem. Now you begin to understand, oh wait a minute, there was another one, 9/11. That too created problems for not just Wall Street, but some bankers, not all. Again, it was Russian bonds which were looted. But you'll notice one thing. It is invariably these banks and bankers who are doing this. And in India, what do you think is happening? All these banks, if Indian banks and institutions sell, who will buy? Foreign banks and foreign bankers. Who are they? Standard Chartered Bank, DBS Bank, Deutsche Bank, call it Citigroup, HSBC. They're all owned by Rothschilds. So I wasn't wrong when I said somebody is trying to get a foothold, a strong foothold, to take over Indian industry. So please, let us remember, it's not just to do with toppling Modi or toppling the BJP, but it also includes putting a puppet up there so that they can get their way. The Chinese would love Rahul Gandhi to be there, thanks to that agreement between the Communist Party of China and the Congress Party of India, meaning the Gandhi family. It's an MOU they signed in 2008. That is why I suspect strongly that they are working together. One via Hindenburg, the other via BBC. And the American bankers through Victoria Nuland. That's why I said it's a three-pronged one, an attack, not two, but three. And the third one, so far, is low-key, but behind the scenes, but just as dangerous, if not the most dangerous. You see, it's not easy to understand this, but it's something I've been aware of for a long time. Now, they keep asking, the Adani Group has grown so much. Look, any business must grow. If it doesn't, it goes. Let me give you an example. Do you remember when mobile phones came out? The little Nokia one. It was cheap. Everybody bought it. In India, it just sold like wildfire. Why? All your tradesmen, your plumbers, your electricians, your repairman, your TV serviceman, everybody and his grandmother had one of these. Why? They could converse, they could make booking, you could call the man directly, he'd come over, instead of having to go to one point and he might come 2 days later. But what happened after that? Somebody took the same phone and put a camera in it. Then somebody put something else in it, a better camera or a bigger screen at not much higher a price. They sold and this one went out of business. Then what happened? The mobile phone became bigger, but it virtually replaced a PC. Because now you could access internet, you could take photographs, then you had things like WhatsApp, Instagram, Twitter, what have you. And all that you could access through your mobile. You can even do mobile banking through your mobile phone. So what happened to the old one? Nobody wants it anymore. Classic example. And this goes back to the economic theory I propounded in 1970. That any industry, there's a gestation period, take-off period. Now, if you don't invest in R&D and come out with an improvement or a much lower price product or reduce the price so much, you get a plateau and then this thing goes out because it's replaced by something better or something more useful. This is a classic example. Same with the PC. It started off like a glorified typewriter, the old 286 or 386. And then it just took off. You had your desktop and then your PC, which you could carry around with you wherever you went. And those PCs are bigger and better in the sense of capacity, not size. I mean, this is the basics of business. And if Adani uses those basics and he grows and grows and grows, what's wrong with it? See, that's the difference between the old Congress for almost 7 decades, I'd call them the lost decade, and Modi's BJP, which is working us up and says, be a lot more business-like in your approach. And you can see youngsters of today. I've seen the difference. You know, when I used to walk, you see a guy on a bicycle. He goes 1, 2. I could walk faster than most of them. Today, they just whiz by. Nobody's got time, or they understand time is money. You see, what had Modi done? And what did the Congress do? India was a sleeping giant under the Congress. They got him slightly to shake a little and then put him back to sleep and made sure that giant remained asleep. What did Modi do? He came in and gave it a little injection. The giant woke up and he said, okay, time to go, flexes his muscles, which nobody seems to like. People in India love it. But anyone outside, no. Then he built roads, got the internet free for a lot of areas. It improved connectivity. People could go, move. They could go to where the jobs are. India is full of migrant workers. In the sense, a chap from UP may be working in Mumbai or in Hyderabad or Bangalore, which is about 1500 miles away. You couldn't do that before. It was rare. Before, people would go abroad and stay there. Now they go abroad and come back. Which again, the Americans don't like. Why? They want more millionaires in America to sell things here. And this is the way they develop India. Very high price market. But that's a different story. Well, folks, do remember, the sleeping giant has begun to wake up and flex his muscles. Don't put it back to sleep again. Give us a chance. And you'll know what we can do. Remember, we invented numerology. The zero. Where did that come from? Without that, you think of mathematics today. Have you ever tried multiplying or dividing in Roman numerals? Boy, you'll have some fun. But will you ever get any answers? I don't think so. Which is why this country is so amazing. You talk about wonders of the world. You go to Tanjore. It's a town or city in Tamil Nadu. Go to Brihadishwara temple. It is not only an engineering marvel, but it's also an architectural marvel. Because this is probably the only large structure anywhere in the world where no foundations were ever dug. It is built just on land. Anybody ever thought of that? No. And yet it's there. So you see, people in India have to understand we had a tremendous heritage. Don't throw it away. Use it for the future. We have been doing things at a much lower cost than the Americans or the Russians or the Europeans. For instance, our probe to Mars. First attempt, we got there. And how much did it cost? $70 million? We are putting satellites in space for the Americans and the Europeans and even the Russians. Why? It's cheaper than anybody else. And effective too. And yet we were so far behind to begin with, you begin to wonder, where did all these brains suddenly come from? Worth thinking about. That all intelligence and capability is not with white people. Us brown skins are also not far behind, and in many ways we're way ahead of you. It's just that we had the misfortune to have people like the Congress looking after Indian affairs, which means enslavement and slavery. And people who came here wiped out our history from our memories. We have to go back, look into it, use it to go forward. Because most of our experiences, remember this and remember it carefully, all the experience you have is in the past, not in the future. You have to understand that experience, assimilate it, and use it to think for the future. You can't escape from that. Even the American space program was based on what was obtained from Hitler's Germany, Werner von Braun. Without him, there'd be no American rocket research or missiles. It's all from their past, not from their future. That's what I mean when I said, take that past, put it in front of you, learn it, understand it, use those principles for the future. Well, thanks, folks. I hope this puts that particular problem to rest. And stop messing around with business and business houses. Let them do their work. And let Parliament please get up off your behinds and do your work. Don't interfere in other people's affairs. You talk about Adani and so on. Instead of demanding a JPC, why don't you get hold of SEBI and the RBI to do their work, and you do your work, what parliamentarians are supposed to do, instead of wasting time with all this. There are so many laws that need to be repealed that have been there for 200 years. We don't need those laws, and yet that's what's holding us back. So please, you guys in Parliament, do your job. Don't waste my tax money, and let them and the regulators do their job. Thanks, folks. I hope you like this one. If and when you do, please subscribe, like, pass it on to your friends, and ask them to pass it on to their friends and relatives too. Thank you. See you next time.